Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Ukraine War news update for the 17th of May 2024. It's the second one, although I have done a breaking news update, so I suppose effectively a third one. Now, this is exactly what I was expecting. I reported to you variously that there was this huge drone attack into Russia and occupied Crimea, into Sevastopol area of Crimea and also Novorossiysk. Both are home ports, one the former, now one the current, of the Black Sea Fleet. And I would absolutely have bet my mortgage that there would have been military targets there, although we only heard of strikes on port infrastructure, mining infrastructure, refineries and oil depots, so on and so forth. But now news is coming out. At least there are claims from unnamed sources to Ukrainska Pravda that there were military targets in both Sevastopol and Novorossiysk, but don't know much more about that. Drones were targeted at ships and other vessels of the Black Sea Fleet located in occupied Sevastopol and the Russian city of Novorossiysk in Krasnodar Krai, according to the media outlets' sources. So expect there to be more news coming out. Be interesting to see what, if any, damage is done. Normally, the most successful strikes on these ships have been done by naval, unmanned sea drones, sea vehicles, but also by Storm Shadow or Scalp, e.g. cruise missiles. So I don't know whether aerial drones will have great effect on ships. And we don't know the success of naval drones because they were out and about as well as those 100. This report's 102, there are reports 105, reports of 95. Just a lot of Ukrainian drones. And I talked about whether there would be a retaliation. I'm pretty sure that Russia would retaliate. Apparently there are big explosions in Odessa at the moment, and I guess that is by way of retaliation. Right, let's move on to military aid and equipment. So Denmark announced yesterday a huge new aid package for Ukraine worth $816 million. This is a phenomenally large amount for the country, the size of the country in terms of population and GDP. They are already pretty much at the top of the Kiel Institute Ukraine weapons tracker or aid tracker. Denmark just giving even more. I mean, this is a really sizable contribution. Of this amount, $350 million will be used to strengthen air defense. It also provides funding for the future transfer of F-16 aircraft, additional artillery pieces, shells, and anti-tank mines. Good news there. Now, German to Ukraine adds to this. That's interesting, he says, in direct reply to that tweet. Apparently, the Danish contribution to the German IAAD initiative, so this is the air defense initiative that the Germans are leading, which aims to strengthen the Ukrainian air defense, will be $134 million. The Danish funds will be used to support the purchase of a German Patriot battery. So since the Dutch contribution, 150 million euros, and a Belgian contribution, 200 million euros, are not yet allocated to a specific use case, it can be assumed that Germany will sell another Patriot battery to Ukraine for 150 million euros to 484 million euros, thanks to Belgium, Denmark, and the Netherlands. The only other contribution to the German initiative, Canada, with 52 million euros, will be used to purchase IRIS-T SL missiles, so the short-range IRIS-T missiles. I therefore don't think that more money will be required. So Germany will donate a battery to Ukraine and sell another one to Ukraine with Belgian, Danish, Dutch funds. Likely means that other countries are not even interested in supplying a Patriot battery to Ukraine for money, or they are demanding much more money than Germany. If, for example, no further batteries are supplied by the US, Ukraine can still look forward to 2 new Patriot batteries from Germany, available from June or July, one of which was financed with foreign funds. And then he just talks about the figures he used. So just to be clear, someone had pointed out to me that Denmark could also financially support the delivery of the third German Patriot battery, and that it is not about a fourth one that is being sold to Ukraine. Although I think it's very unlikely that, and at the same time hope that this is not the case, because it would both harm Ukraine and be another PR disaster for Germany. I've nevertheless contacted the German Ministry of Defense and asked for information. I'll let you know further details. So either it's going to be contribute to the third German battery that's going to be given, or it's funding a fourth one that they're going to effectively buy off the Germans. The Germans are doing an absolutely fantastic job in trying to get Ukraine further Patriot batteries, where so many other nations are not coming up with goods. Germany are. And we must remember this. Don't just get sidetracked by tourist conversations. Germany are doing an incredible job in this area for sure. Okay. So, according to German Minister of Defense Boris Pistorius, Lithuania is contributing to that aforementioned German IAAD initiative, which aims to strengthen the Ukrainian air defense with 6 Amber 1800 air surveillance radars. He did not provide any further details, such as a planned delivery date. So these are those radars you can see very quickly being, that's a time-lapse video, being set up and deployed. That it would be super useful, obviously. So Germany, this is an overview of the initiative so far, with knowledge that Denmark is going to be possibly financing a further Patriot battery. It's just a little bit of unknowns at the moment. But Germany, 1 Patriot battery. Lithuania, 6 Amber 1800 air surveillance radars. Belgium, 200 million euros. Netherlands, 150 million euros. Denmark, 134 million for financing for a Patriot battery, and Canada, 52 million euros for financing of IRIS-T SL missiles. So really good news there. Thank you to Lithuania for that. Now, during her visit to Germany, President of the Swiss Confederation Viola Amherd confirmed that Germany's Minister of Defense Boris Pistorius is in talks with her about Switzerland giving up its purchased, though not yet delivered, Patriot batteries for Ukraine. According to her, the Swiss government had not yet discussed this subject, so she could only confirm the talks and thus the German inquiry. A delivery to Ukraine would still not take place for several years and would have to be financed externally. However, this is not the first time that Germany has taken such a path. The same has already been done successfully with Egypt, when Egypt was persuaded, probably in return for compensation, to give up its first 2 IRIS-T SLM systems so they could be delivered to Ukraine instead. This is also the reason 2 of the 3 IRIS-T SLM systems in Ukraine have a special sand camo instead of green. So there is this idea that Switzerland could give up these Patriots that are being built. They've been ordered. They had to be configured specifically to Switzerland's demands. Colby Badwa, on the other hand, says this is honestly the least useful thing Switzerland could do to support Ukraine. They need additional Patriots now, not in 3 years. Switzerland needs to start authorising third-party transfer requests for Swiss-made equipment. Now that would make a difference. That would help Ukraine, he says. And I broadly agree with that. I completely agree with that. I think the idea that you get Patriots in 2 years is just not useful. They absolutely need them now. Austria has decided to create a special fund worth 500 million euros. So this is Austria as a neutral nation, and they're intending to support exports, investments, and businesses in Ukraine. So Ukraine's economic outlook has been downgraded. They look like they are in trouble economically, and that is going to be a lot to do with having their energy system absolutely hammered, mobilization going to take effect and hammer the economy. So it is not looking good for Ukraine going forward, as you would expect with a country that's been massively invaded. So this 500 million from Austria is incredibly useful. Like I've said before, if you have neutral countries and you get frustrated that they're neutral and therefore can't help with munitions, my idea is that it shouldn't be a worry as long as they're still giving in some way, because it's 2 sides of a square and it's about specialisation. So, okay, if Switzerland and Austria aren't going to give X and Y bits of military kit, if they give money to the same value as that, and then another nation can give X and Y bits of kit, then and not do the stuff that Austria and Switzerland are going to do in terms of economics or humanitarian work, then you get to the same point, right? Unless Switzerland and Austria just have so many warehouses full of kit that they could expedite to Ukraine right now, where the other countries would have to order that, then you might get an advantage of Switzerland, and a frustration that they aren't doing it, an advantage to Switzerland or Austria providing military equipment. But otherwise, as long as there's parity there in some sense, it's as I say, 2 sides of a square. So those are my thoughts. As mentioned, Lithuania handing over those radars. Right. French aid to Ukraine is reporting, Sébastien Lecornu, the defense minister, saying, and the idea that this is actually pretty fast, saying that on Wednesday, their target of 4,000 155mm ammunition shells per month has been reached. Now, while deliveries will continue to increase until the end of the year, they're looking to get it up to 5,000 by the end of the year. Now, bear in mind, the US is looking at, where are they at the moment? They're something like 30,000 a month, and maybe even more than that now. And I think they're looking at being 85,000 a month, maybe even higher than that, at the end of their objective time period. So 4,000 puts that number is now in context. It's a very small number, but France aren't really a big producer, evidently, of shells, right? And so they have argued that what they do is provide really good shells, fewer of them, quality, range, and all that. That not just your bog standard, get them off the production line as quickly as you can type shells. Nonetheless, I think that's a little bit of a weak argument, but they are upping to 4,000 a month. So that is one nation giving what Ukraine would like to use in a day. So they've been using 2,000 a day, and they'd certainly like to use 4,000 a day. So that's a day's worth produced in a month by France. And it's the idea that although that might sound very small, and it is, but it's added to all the other countries. They're not the only country. Now, the question is, can France do more? Should France do more? Do they have the ability to ramp up the production of ammunition shells to a much more significant amount? Well, they're trying, and they're ahead of schedule. So they're ahead of schedule of where they wanted to be in terms of ramping up. So that's good, but it is only a small amount of the total that Ukraine need. But again, it's about specialization. Like I said earlier, with regard to Austria and Switzerland, if France can provide other things much more, much quicker than other nations, then that will compensate for not providing as many shells, or they provide money to the Shell Initiative that can procure shells elsewhere. Right. Talking of shells, and as I mentioned earlier, Zelensky said for the first time in years of the war, none of the brigades complains that there are no artillery shells, and this has been happening for the last 2 months. As I said, I'm not sure what he means by that, because I'm fairly sure they haven't had 2 months worth of shells. So it could be that they've just been ramping up for 2 months and they're at this point now. I would also claim, as I said earlier, that certain units on the ground might not agree that actually there is no shell hunger. But he says, however, we still have to work at it. The Czech initiative will go ahead, and they need the Estonian initiative after that, where they found more shells. They just need everything they can get their hands on. Right, okay. This is... Oh, and talking about shells, sorry, before I'm going to go on to that, because that's really important. Talking about shells, when I show you videos, I always like to make those videos have a point. I don't just like to show you, although I can't really show them, so I just reference them. Show you stuff getting blown up. It's like, whoop-de-doo, here's another tank getting blown up. So it's like, okay, what is it about this tank? Or what is it about the way that it's being blown up? Or whatever. Here is an interesting video, and I referenced this already today. These are the 2 tanks that were blown up in Kursk. So I said this is interesting anyway because they are hitting tanks that are maneuvering inside Kursk, which is the oblast north of Sumy, which then would lend itself towards the idea that Russia are going to attack into Sumy as well as into Kharkiv Oblast. Okay, so there's that. But what's interesting about this footage, and again, I can't really show it to you, but you have these tanks getting set up. I don't know what's going on, whether they're being built into revetments, what's going on with this field. There's lots of other stuff around. But when they get hit, it's only those 2 tanks. And you get shells hitting here. Now, these are pieces of artillery giving, firing at those tanks. And not, so there's another one, so you had one hitting over there, one hitting over here. And then you have one hitting much closer to the tanks. And then it cuts to FPV drones. And what's really interesting is it's the FPV drones that blow up the tanks. So the FPV drones, and they're hit by, I don't know, at least 2 drones each, these 2 tanks. And those 2 tanks are completely blown up. And what I learned from that is that drones potentially are getting to a point where they can replace artillery ammunition. And if Ukraine has the drones more than they have the artillery ammunition, then this is a good sign going forward. And also, it's probably that lack of artillery ammunition has probably meant the Ukrainians have gone to the drawing board to work out how to make drones as effective as artillery in doing certain tasks. In this case, I mean, traditionally you would love a big old bit of artillery shell to land on top of one of these tanks, and it's like goodbye tank. Weaker armor at the top, shell landing on it. That's good stuff. But here we saw at least 3 shells not hitting those targets. And you count up the cost of those shells in terms of just the value, but also the value for the shells in terms of Ukraine not having as many. They almost go up in value. It's supply and demand. So they have incredibly high value, and you're using them and you're missing these tanks, because that's the nature of artillery, unless it's a precision guided munition or they've absolutely nailed their firing. But again, you normally have to walk these shells in until you finally get there. Now, and it depends what they're firing from. Is it from an old D30 or is it from an Archer that will have better firing accuracy? But the drones here are used, and then they take out these tanks. So they have created drones that can take out tanks. They appear to have the same range as artillery. And so you're just starting to compare drones versus artillery and thinking drones are cheaper. I presume these are much cheaper drones. They 2 of them can take out a single tank, and maybe you could argue one of them took it out. They're just making sure with another, and possibly they've got armor piercing warheads or explosives on these drones. Who knows? But I'm fairly sure that this video tells us that drones are more effective than artillery in taking out mechanized equipment, and that is a change here. So we talked about previously in the war, especially during the height of the shell hunger, that the Ukrainians, you can't replace artillery with drones, and actually you still can't in many ways. So if you're talking about artillery barrages where you've maybe got a battery like absolutely hammering a piece of land where the enemy is attacking through, then that is far more, certainly psychologically effective, and could be far more destructive than a number of drones flying through. However, you might get to a stage where drones are used in that kind of way, where you have whole swarms of drones, and a swarm of drones might be, or not swarm as in autonomous, but a whole fleet of drones being used that have that psychological effect possibly, and have the same tangible effect on attacks as artillery, and are just much cheaper. So I think it's really important to look at these points. And then when it comes to videos like what this should be, which is procurement and provision, you're thinking, okay, in light of Ukraine struggling to get the artillery ammunition, if they get just huge numbers of drones and drone operators, then possibly things are looking better for them than previously thought. Okay, I talked about this previously. There are several claims that have come out from Pentagon and from different spokespeople about whether American weaponry can be used into Russia. So here Colby Badwar says no change in policy on Ukraine hitting Russian territory with US weapons. And that is really unfortunate, I think. This is not a shift in US policy. Blinken and State Department officials have said this line verbatim multiple times over the past year, which is we don't encourage blah, blah, blah. And people jumped onto that and said, oh, they're giving permission for the Ukrainians to use American missiles into Russia. And I think the Pentagon's gone away, come back and said, no, we're not. And that is really frustrating. My question is whether I assume that's a Pentagon decision rather than a Biden decision. I don't know if Biden would make those. Maybe he would. But I think the president would make those decisions on the basis of what his military advisors are saying. Or maybe it's like the Jake Sullivan security advisors. Either the US DOD or the US Biden admin, Jake Sullivan lot, are just really scared of escalation. Or both, possibly both. Maybe it's baked into the US way of doing things coming from the Cold War. But it's really frustrating because, do you know what? Russia used North Korean missiles and fired them into Ukraine. Russia uses Iranian missiles and drones and fires them into Ukraine. So this shouldn't be escalatory. That is an escalation, right? That's an escalation. I just don't freaking understand this. As Jürgen Naudit here says, that's incredible. American weapons are intended for use on the territory of Ukraine, says the Pentagon. Pentagon spokeswoman Sabrina Singh noted that the US has not changed its position on the use of weapons provided to Ukraine. As she noted, the weapons should be used to regain the sovereign territory of Ukraine. Well, yeah, use it to regain that land by firing into Ukraine. Into Russia. The weapons that are provided are intended for use on the battlefield, Singh said. Recently, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken had said that US does not encourage Ukraine to strike outside its territories, but Ukraine itself decides how to wage war. Just super frustrates me. It's just handing advantage. It's like, oh, Russia, would you like advantages in this war? Here you go. You set the red lines. We'll keep to those, and we certainly won't do anything that would give Ukraine the advantage. Jimmy Rushton here says a directional electronic warfare platform that was apparently inspired by the fighting in Ukraine and is designed to, quote, take out drones and military vehicles and has a range of 1 kilometre. Now, 1 kilometre. This is quite similar to the Dragonfire, that laser that the UK have developed that costs £10 to fire a shot and has accuracy to 1 kilometre to the size of a pound coin, and is being, I think, sent to Ukraine, and they are hopefully going to use that. It's going to be a bit of a test bed. UK has done some really good innovation here. And here DSTL, who they're variously around the UK, but very close to where I live, in a number of places actually. DSTL have said that this weapon can take out drones and military vehicles from 1 kilometre with audio waves. So this is an audio waves weapon and costs 10p a shot. 10p a shot. That's a tenth of a pound, if you don't know what 10p is. Developed by our experts and partners, our tech ensures our armed forces are ready for the future. Now, the big question is, does this get to go to Ukraine? Who knows?
It's critical that, given the developments in the world, that we accelerate technology out of the lab into military capability, and we do that quickly and we do it effectively, and we get new capabilities to our frontline users such that we can start changing that balance of operational advantage. So this radio frequency directed energy weapon works by coupling high energy radio waves to a target and disrupting and destroying the electronics in that target. Essentially, what Hollywood has been showing us for a few years, we're trying to turn that into reality.
I'm going to turn it off, take that from science fiction and turn it into a useful military capability, because I will just get hit by a music copyright violation. So this is a game changer program, and it has meant we link together defense equipment and support, along with DSTL, who work in the science and technology space, in order to really catapult things out of the lab and into the hands of the armed forces much more rapidly. And the benefits of radio frequency directed energy weapons are that the effects they have on electronics are almost instantaneous. It's a sub-second response time of a target that you engage. RFDEW, radio frequency directed energy weapon, is game changing in a sense of that cost effectiveness in terms of actually generating a shot. We're talking less than 10p per shot. We're really trying to impress from this demonstrator is looking at the ability to take out single drones, but also deal with swarms. So that's really important. It's been incredibly intense. It's been very exciting. It's been very difficult, and it continues to be very hard work, says the spokesman. And we are right up there, amongst the world leaders in this technology. And this is an opportunity, I think, for us to kind of maintain and cement that position. So it's incredibly exciting. Anyway, that's a bit of a DSTL advert, but incredibly important, I think, development there. And if they can, especially when you talk about swarms of drones, if you can knock out an area of drones with using audio waves, and it's as cheap as that, then goodness me, you'll have plenty. You'll have a bunch of these on every ship. And indeed, you can employ them on cargo ships as well. Say going through the Red Sea, incredibly important. Right. NATO allies are inching closer to sending troops into Ukraine to train Ukrainian forces, says the New York Times, a move that would be another blurring of the previous red line and could draw the US and Europe more directly into war. A little bit of scary rhetoric there from the New York Times. So, one of the largest ammunition plants in Russia has been nationalized in the Moscow region. The shares of the Klimovsky ammunition plant, which previously belonged to the family of businessman Boris Krasnov, will be transferred to the Russian Federal Agency for State Property Management. At the same time, law enforcement agencies have initiated criminal cases against persons involved in the embezzlement of the plant shares between 2002 and 2010, and they are under investigation, a source in the government agencies told IBC. Rostec, which is one of the plant's shareholders, the corporation owns a 36% stake, was satisfied with the court's decision. In January of this year, an accident occurred at the boiler station located in the territory of the plant, as a result of which 170 houses of the Podolsk were left without heating and hot water in 20-degree frosts. Roman Ryazantsev, deputy head of Podolsk's Housing and Utility Services, Alexander Chikov, head of the boiler station at the Klimovsk cartridge plant, Igor Kushnikov, general director of the plant, and Alexander Samarin, former minister of energy of the Moscow region, were arrested in criminal cases initiated after the accident. The Kremlin is getting key war machine enterprises back under its full control. There will be many ways that the central government in Moscow will be able to take control of private enterprises, because there's so much corruption going on, there's so much scope for wrongdoing, that you can probably guarantee that most private entities have done some form of wrongdoing, and it's not that the Kremlin wants to punish them when they do that wrongdoing, but it is they log it in a little black book, and this is my speculation, by the way, and just wait for the time that they can most effectively use that knowledge. So this is a time when they're at war that they're going to pull on some of those pages of the black book and say, oh, this manufacturing enterprise that is concerned with the defense industry, or maybe a supply to the defense industry, we might need them to operate exactly how we want them, so we're going to take them back under state control, and we're going to claim that they've had some kind of corruption which we knew about, we did nothing about, and take them under state control. So yeah, we are seeing that more and more, and I think it's just another sign that things aren't going very well for Russia. When you look under the bonnet of the Russian economy, you know that all is not well. A Russian FPV pilot, says Samuel Bendet, says live on Russian TV that only 10 to 15% of FPVs he gets are from the MOD via Sudoplatov effort, which imposes limitations on the numbers received, while the rest are received from different domestic volunteer organisations and tech startups. He makes a point to state at the end that he does not get most FPVs from the Russian MOD. Now that's really interesting, because we had heard that the Russians are making at one point the claim was 300,000, because when the Ukrainians claimed they got up to 50,000 a month FPVs or drones being manufactured, the Russians claimed they had 300,000, but we were seeing that the Ukrainians were using more drones on the front line than the Russians. So how could that be? Either the Russians are lying, or they've got a massive stockpile of drones that they can't use, and that appears not to be. The latter seems very unlikely, and so it's much more likely that the Russians are lying. And here we have someone on live TV stating that 10 to 15% of the drones that they are receiving are from the Russian drone initiative, the MOD drone initiative, which means that 85 to 90% are coming from, I don't know, from charitable donations and other projects for drone provision. And I would be insane. It's incredibly doubtful that means that they are producing 300,000 drones a month, because there's going to be no way that 270,000 of those drones are going to be coming from the private sector of like volunteers in their flats in Yekaterinburg or wherever. So that's really interesting. Sometimes it's these little snippets that are hugely important and give you a bit of a major insight. Reuters is reporting that Sri Lanka is sending a delegation to return mercenaries fighting on behalf of Russia to Russia. So according to reports, a top official of the Sri Lankan government has stated that their government will send a delegation to Russia to investigate the fate of hundreds of nationals reportedly fighting in a war in Ukraine. We already know that there are quite a number of Nepalese, we don't know, the claims are that there are 14,000 Nepalese, but we know that there's certainly a fairly significant number because we have seen direct evidence of Nepalese fighting. People from Cape Verde Islands, people from a number of different locations. Cuba, we've got evidence that at least 200 Cubans have been recruited. And this is how Russia is able to keep their recruitment figures going. But which is an advantage for Russia. Ukraine can't really do that. Yeah, they've got the International Legion, but that's much more of I think the sorts of tactics that Russia is using are very much underhand, bribing people to come in on or offering the sweeteners of, say, a student visa, and then in underhand ways getting them conscripted into the armed forces. And what we've seen with certain Indian civilians ending up on the wrong side there. Some people that went for New Year's celebrations to St. Petersburg or something and end up being conscripted into the army. So I think Ukraine doesn't do that. Russia just uses all sorts of dodgy mechanisms to get people fighting for them. And of course, when they die, they don't have to answer to their own internal population and therefore have popularity issues and growing dissent within the Russian economy, because these are foreigners that Russia doesn't particularly care about. Obviously, the families will care about that, but how much effect will that have on Russia's prosecution of the war, that they've got a bunch of families in Sri Lanka or India angry with the Russian government? And then this infographics has come out here. This is from Pekka Kaljuniemi. Just left the session on sanctions at a conference. The takeaway message is this: Western companies are assisting the Kremlin to produce missiles that are then used to bomb Ukrainian cities and civilians. There wouldn't be more advanced missiles without Western companies and components. This war is fueled by corporate greed. Politicians in the G7 don't have the willpower to stop Russian energy exports or component imports because they don't want to disrupt the markets. Many companies, for example Microsoft, are returning to business as usual in Russia since this has no negative effect anymore. Ukrainians hitting Russian oil refineries is an effective mechanism of weakening the Kremlin. And there you go. So Western components in Russian weapons, 64% of them are US, 17.9% are 18% are German, 7% are Dutch, 7% are Swiss, 4% are Taiwanese. Wow. And finally, here's an example of some earplugs with a Russian anti-tank grenade launcher. So the earplugs are literally just a piece of paper. That is you have to roll up the piece of paper and whack it in your lug hole. I presume it's like some kind of megaphone. Maybe it's going to actually make you deafer, more deaf. Wow. You roll up your piece of paper, put it in the ear. That's the standard of some of the components. So yes, they are getting components, but there are some things they really are struggling to do normally, properly. And ear defenders apparently are one of them. Anyway, thanks for watching. Really appreciate your support. Please like, subscribe and share. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.